Chuck, does the council, does the planning commission have discretion here as to hearing matters like this? I mean, I've heard that the defense to not hearing this lawsuit is that that this submission has been improperly brought before them, that this is not their job, essentially, to look at matters like this, the planning commission, that is.
That is their job, to protect the wetlands of the city of Rye.
It's in their charter?
It's in their charter, it's in their code. It's chapter 195 of the city code.
I've also heard that the city attorney has said, you know, this is all well and good, but because of the other litigation, Mr. Schubert's litigation about his civil rights violations when they tried to have him committed to a mental health clinic, and his lawsuit against the Gateses in state court, because of that other litigation, that this matter could not be heard until that litigation is resolved.
Ted, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm one that likes to settle all litigation. I don't believe in litigation. I think if you put two reasonable people at a table, anything can be resolved. You want to sell something and I want to buy it. We're not going to leave that table till we make a deal. There's a fair price, there's a fair understanding of the minds. And at the March 21st City Council meeting, I spoke to the council with regards to this issue and why we were not permitted to go forward. I explained to them that they were the managing body of the city and they had the authority to tell the Planning Commission that they had to hear this matter. I also brought up the fact that this matter could be settled, and in my opinion, at no cost to the city. I had also sent a letter dated March 13th that gave me authorization to speak to the city with regards to the Schubert matter in an effort to reach a settlement. I then received a letter from City Council stating to submit that offer in writing. I was not authorized to do that. Of course, there's legal attorneys involved. I am not an attorney and I don't represent myself as an attorney. But I'm a very good negotiator and I like to make a deal happen. As I mentioned, I don't believe in litigation. I explained that my interest wasn't sitting down with those in authority in the city. They could have their counsel with them if they chose. I'd have the Schubert's counsel with me. But I was not authorized to present anything in writing, but I was authorized to sit and talk about a possible settlement that would not cost the city a penny.
Let me just...
Didn't the legal attorney that night she insisted that you were an attorney?
Yes, she did, and I advised her, did I ever represent myself as attorney? And I never have. And she knows I'm not attorney. I've dealt with her in many other municipalities, so I didn't know the purpose of that, but she knows.
No, because I was there that night, and I was wondering.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be clear, you've joined the Schubert team as a paid expert.
Yes, I have. But, but I would do it for nothing. I'm very fond of those people.
I know you always say, but we should be clear. You are being paid by the Schuberts.
Yes, I am.
At some, and you have no personal incentive if the Schuberts were to settle for $1, $0, or $5 million. It would make no difference to you.
I make less money if they settle, and I'd rather see this matter settled tomorrow.
Okay. So,
in any event, I'd like to just follow up on that a little bit. We, to date, after our written letter of March 13th and my verbal statement in front of the council on March 21st, and Sis, I think you were at that meeting too, where I said that we could settle this at no cost to the city, have not been able to sit down with the city council to even discuss settling this at no cost to the city. It just doesn't make any sense. I believe the city has a serious liability.
What do you think is the holdup? There has to be something holding them up.
It makes absolutely no sense to me. What I've been told is that the answer is that they can't discuss it because it's in litigation. Litigations are settled every day. Every day litigations are settled. Fortunately, I've never been in any type of litigation like this other than the land use issues. But, and I've been very successful in every one of them, by the way. Never lost one yet. As a matter of fact, the municipality had to give me a check for $2.7 million in the early 90s. That was a fun one.
Well, that actually is something I think our viewers will be interested in. Sis and I, as Rye City taxpayers, actually don't want a big check passed across the table
Well,
to
that's an
anybody
interesting
here.
case, and that's why I have such a feeling for the Schubert's issue. I went through something very similar as this, and it's with Bob Schubert. This is as much a matter of principle as
All
anything
principle.
else. He knows how right he is. Bob Schubert is a licensed professional engineer, and he knows what happened here. His consultants, he's retained a professional hydrologist. With my background in construction and hydrology, again, I'm not a professional engineer, but I sure know what happens out there. I got pretty good common sense. Bob knows this is wrong. He knows he wasn't supported by his city. And after 4 years, he had no alternative because of the principle to file this litigation. And he's going to be successful at the end of this thing. But I went through a very similar circumstance. It was an 8-year battle. I won 7 Article 78s, 1 appellate division decision, 1 Court of Appeals decision. And I then, once I had established a pattern of abuse by the city, filed what's called the 1983 action, a civil rights lawsuit against 13 of the public officials, board of trustees,
Not in
zoning
Rye.
board members. No, this is in one of the river towns municipality, and that matter was settled after 8 years, an expense by me of $700,000 and 3 years of fighting. The municipality had to write me a check for $2.7 million in settlement. They didn't want to go to court because it was a pretty substantial case. I mean, something's wrong. And this is a very similar case, and this is why I'm emotionally attached to Mr. Schubert in this case, because he's so right here, so right here. And I'm a guy that fights for principle, too. So I'm in this for the principle. And
Well, that brings us to, in Mr. Schubert's discussions with the city through you, he's made all of these settlement kind of statements and positions very well known. They currently are under a $5 million lawsuit, which they could lose.
absolutely.
And Sis and I would start paying. But it's not a $5 million bogey here, because he's willing to settle for very little or no cost to the city.
Absolutely.
He wants his water back.
Ted, before I forget, there's one very important issue, too. The city has spent over $200,000 in legal fees already on this case.
On the Schubert matter.
On the Schubert matter. Now, they're going to tell you the insurance company paid this. Let me tell you, if it comes back to the point, we all know insurance companies, and the insurance company finds that the city was negligent in not enforcing their codes and was aware that it was in a wetland, the insurance company is going to pull all that money back pretty quick. And in these economic times, it seems awful senseless to spend $200,000 in legal fees on a matter that could be settled at no cost, and to let this continue for another minute. You brought up before, what is the duty of Planning Commission? It is therefore the policy of the City of Rye to protect its citizens, including generations yet unborn, by preventing the despolation and destruction of wetlands and watercourses while taking into account varied ecological, economic, recreational, and aesthetic values. That is a part of Chapter 195, Wetlands and Watercourses, and the purpose of the Planning Commission, right in their code.
That FPM group that the city hired, they were the ones I told you before said publicly, this is a wetland. What else did they find?
Yeah, Ted, I'm glad you brought that up again. That occurred at the same meeting that Mr. Sack called for the investigation, which was voted down, that in effect we submitted in this report. The FPM report was a gentleman by the name of Phillips prepared this report for FPM. In his retainer agreement, Mr. Phillips had raised concerns with regards to subsurface hydrology.
He raised those concerns with the city when they
With
hired
the
him?
city when they hired him. And the fact is that until you do subsurface hydrology, which is looking in the ground, no one knows where this water went.
How do you look in the ground?
You excavate. You look around where this work was done. And to speculate by looking in the dry well or looking at the pipes, from one end to the other to the dry well, what happened here means nothing. And Mr. Phillips knew that, and he told that to the city. It's in one of the documents in this report. And his retainer agreement is in this report, and it says, you have raised concerns with regards to subsurface hydrology. So until the city does the investigation excavates, which the Schuberts are going to be able to do by way of a court order very shortly, we will know if in fact the Gates project created the diminution of water of the Schubert Pond. And we are 95% sure that it did. It's not just coincidence that this wetland ran for 100 years. There is evidence of the farmer's drain. You saw it when you were a child, this water running. And the week after there's a project done on a neighboring property, that water stops flowing.
Well, Chuck, in layman's terms, if that water flowed, I've heard this term perched water table. And when that means there's a layer of soil or some matter
Yeah,
that
what
water runs across, and then when you break that, the water goes down below. And
absolutely, Ted.
Doesn't make it to his pond.
Till we open that ground up and see what happened, no one can definitively say what happened. But the speculation, my speculation, and again, I'm not a hydrologist, I'm not a professional engineer, and Mr. Bill Canavan, who was retained by the Schuberts to do a very elaborate report, which was presented to the city also, is that when they excavated to put in these new pipes,
The Gateses.
they also installed the dry well. Their own plan shows this dry well being approximately 3 feet below what was the old farmer's drain. When that was installed, there's also 6 to 8 inches of gravel below that dry well. When you excavate with a piece of machinery,
A backhoe.
or a small excavator in this case, I believe, you don't excavate to the inch, it might be another foot down. So that hole could have been 4 feet below the original farmer's drain, could have pierced the impermeable clay soil level and gone into fractured rock or an entirely different type of a soil. The water that used to go in the farmer's drain then, and this is 95% sure, we are 95% sure what happened. The water that used to go to the Schubert Pond by way of a farmer's drain now comes along, drops down in that hole that's now 3 foot lower and goes in the ground. As a matter of fact, the Martins, who are neighbors of the Schuberts, are now complaining of having more water in their backyard. So it's very likely that this water now has an altered course, goes down in the ground where this work was done on the Gates property and showing up in the Martins property rather than the Schubert Pond. This could be fixed very simply. But we need this in-ground investigation. The city has all the right in the world to do this investigation. Matter of fact, it's in their wetlands code they can do an investigation. It's in their floodplain code they can do an investigation. It's in Chapter 172, Surface Water Erosion Control Permit, that they can do an investigation if there's any violation. And there was clearly a violation. But they don't want to read it for some reason.
Chuck,
but the court's going to tell them they have to read it very shortly.
Well, it seems
unfortunate,
it seems like a waste of taxpayer dollars to be in the courts.
It is a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Where there's a will, there's a way. But for
Always.
some reason,
could be
in this
settled.
case,
if I sat
no
with the mayor right over there, we could settle this thing tomorrow. But we can't get them to sit at the table. And poor Mr. and Mrs. Schubert are sitting with a mud hole in the front of their house. What would you like a mud hole in the front of your house?
That's one
would
of
you,
the
sis?
No, they're not entitled to that.
One of the reasons I'm
They made
involved.
a beautiful spot there.
Oh, it's amazing to me. Amazing.
One of the reasons I'm involved is with that mud hole in front of his house. His house isn't far from mine.
Well, you see it every time you walk by
Well,
there.
there is a thing called West Nile virus.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And this is when you have a reduction in water flows, you get stagnation of fresh
we had
water.
some pictures here to look at this beautiful wetlands garden before and what it looks like today. I mean, the Schuberts cannot even sell this house today. They've had a real estate man there last year that said, I would not even put this home on the market today as it is. It's taken a tremendous value away from the home.
Sitting where you are, if you did have the mayor across from you, or you had some decision maker, what would you suggest the appropriate next steps would be?
Very simple. We just do the investigation, which the city has the authority to do. We go onto the Gates property where this work was done. We do the subsurface investigation, and we see if that interrupted the flow of water to the Schubert Pond, and all indications are that that's what happened. If that shows that it did, we put clay back where that soil layer was disturbed. We put some gravel back in, and the water again flows right down to the Schubert Pond at no cost.
That doesn't sound like a very expensive process.
I would say it's probably $5,000 to $8,000, and we've already spent between the Schuberts and the city maybe $300,000 to $400,000 litigation. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
I'd like to bring this session of Schubert's Pond season 4 to a close, and welcome all of our viewers to contact any of us, or certainly the council members that they know personally, and ask if we can't get this matter resolved in short order. Thanks for watching.